Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, the Carolina Hurricanes are off to a great start. The Canes now are 12-4 in the season after a big win last night. And of course, they've been on a bit of a roll too, 8-2 in their last 10. Not that situation with their farm team in Chicago. And in to talk about some of the struggles that the Wolves have had, of course, our insider, we've got Andrew Rinaldi. Andrew, how are you?
Doing good, Tom. Thanks for having me on again.
Obviously. So the Wolves have been struggling. I checked their standings with that Central Division, and the Wolves, kind of interestingly, sit with just 3 wins in their first 11 games. A little bit slower start than I think they were hoping for, and of course, some of the younger players still kind of finding their way. What are you seeing with the Wolves these days?
Well, I think the one big factor, it's pretty easy to point out, is goal scoring. There just hasn't been a ton of offense on this team. Over their 11 games, they've scored 18 goals. So
wow,
bottom of the league in power play, and it hasn't really helped, obviously, their situation. That can seem like they're not generating a lot with that kind of stat, which I don't think kind of really tells the whole story. I mean, last night, I feel like this was kind of a microcosm of their entire season so far. They spend nearly the entire third period in the Manitoba zone.
Yes.
Can't finish, and then one chance goes the other way because they're playing too aggressive, and Manitoba scores on the breakaway. I mean, I've seen that like 3 or 4 times already. And I can understand the frustration as a fan. I can't imagine the frustration in the locker room right now. So at the same time, I was comparing it to last year's independent Chicago team, which was even worse situation this team is in. So not by much. They were 2-8-1. This team has at least had 3 wins. So it was always going to be a process. And there's a lot of lessons to take away, a lot of growing pains, and you can't just take a look and be like, oh, Felix Unger Sorum has scored a goal, we can throw away his potential hopes of career. Like, no, it's early. These guys are still getting in there, and I think there's a lot to be hopeful for, because eventually the floodgates are going to open, right? It's just, you see them playing with pace, you see them creating chances. They're just not going in right now. And I know it's kind of like an old, tired cliche to just, just trust the process and keep with it. But I think that's what you got to do with a group of young players like this. So tough start. I think I was kind of expecting it to start this way, but it still doesn't make it any easier to go down.
Well, you've got a lot of interesting moving parts. A new coach, of course, Cam Abbott coming in, and he's first time with the Canes, trying to figure out their system. And, of course, all these young players who come from different backgrounds, right around the globe. Some of them very young. I mean, you've got Unger Sorum, you've got Gleb Trikazov, you've got other guys who are extremely young, Ruslan Khazheyev. These guys are young players, and they're cutting their teeth in, probably the second or third best league in the world. So not a surprise. Now, again, there were some concerns with some of the players. You did mention Felix Unger Sorum. Now, he's off to a really tough start. He's got just 1 point in 11 games. He's a -5. So I know they tried him at center for a while. He's back on the wing. What are you seeing with Felix these days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a young kid who's playing his first season in North America. I feel like he burst on the scene with that hot preseason last year in Carolina, and everyone was like, oh man, this kid's just a step away from the NHL, when the reality of it is a little different. And it's an adjustment coming over from an entirely different culture and style and system. So, you got to give this kid time. these are the same kind of concerns that everyone had last year with Marco Kasper coming over on the Red Wings, and when he only had 1 point in his first 10 games, and we're like, oh, what's wrong with Marco? And well, now Marco just scored his first NHL goal the other night and looks like a regular in Detroit for a while. So it's you can realize just how young these guys are, and these adjustment periods. Yes, he's immensely talented, and there's certainly cause for concern, but he's been trying out at center. I believe he was lined up at center again last night. Okay. Been moving to wing, kind of seeing, coach is trying to see where he's feeling comfortable, who he's, trying to get this kid to kind of, break out. It's when everyone's struggling offensively, that just adds more, more pressure to you. And I'm gonna, give it more than a month before I write this young kid off. But, yeah, of course you'd like to see more points and all that, but it's a process, and you have these growing pains. These are grown adults that are all working for an NHL job that he's lining up against every single night. So it's going to take some time. Like I said, I'm not hitting the panic button. I'm not doing any of that. I know there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions there on social media. But in this league, you got to learn to be patient, and that's just it's going to be a process with him and a lot of these guys.
And I mean, Gleb Cherkazov's another one. We saw Gleb really looking sharp in the in some of the camps this summer, and in fact he had a hat trick in one of them, and really looks strong. And I think he's a guy, again, you're right on. We've talked a little bit about this before too, Andrew. These guys coming over, it's a new culture, in some cases a new language. It's a big change for them, let alone just, the hockey side. So we got to give them a little bit of slack. Now, a couple of guys that I think are starting to show their way, and pleased to say this, one of them, of course, is Bradley Nadeau, who's starting to get that offense going. We saw him score a couple of Nadeau-type goals where he rips them, and of course, nice setups as well. And the guy that's been helping him, working on that line very closely with him, they're getting some chemistry, is Ryan Suzuki. What about those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much point A and point B of the offense right now at this point. And, I was on the show earlier talking about how much I'm expecting out of Ryan Suzuki, and he's basically delivered about as much as I was really hoping for. And it's really been heartwarming to say the least, to see the adversity that he's battled through to continue to play at a very high level and really grow into a leader of this team is everything that I was really hoping for him. So I'm happy to see that. And yeah, he's kind of taking Nadeau right under his wing, and literally and figuratively, and just kind of, showing him the ropes of, what you have to do night in and night out in order to produce at this league, and then hopefully for the both of them at the next level. But yeah, when you have a playmaker like that kind of setting you up for some of these looks that Nadeau's had, you'd see, why he's getting some of those early goals here pretty easily. Now, the one last night against Manitoba was, fun little backhand feed from Suzuki, and I mean, that's why Nadeau's getting all these looks for Carolina. That you've seen that shot, he just ripped it, and not a lot of goalies in this league, and are going to be able to stop that one, and hopefully they'll be saying that about the next level as well.
Well, and it's exactly what we expected from Nadeau. We've seen this. We saw it in camp. He's a guy that, and he showed this certainly during his collegiate career. Man, he can really fire the puck. And now he's getting those looks, as you mentioned, I think rightfully so, Andrew. He's getting some looks. His guys are finding some opportunities. Now, another guy that I've been really interested in and watching closely, seems like he's really finding his way, is Justin Robidas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Robidas' motor the last couple of games has really been eye-opening. Going into the season, I'd see highlights and clips of these guys, but I haven't been as in tune, kind of not sure what I was really getting into. And, this guy is just, he's feisty, he's on the puck, and you've seen kind of that will, that drive leading to a lot of scoring chances. He got absolutely jobbed out of one earlier in this weekend. But you like seeing it's less so about the numbers at this level and more about like these processes, because those processes and doing them consistently is what's going to lead to the numbers, not just in Chicago, but at the next level. And that's what really these coaches are looking for. And Robidas got some great habits. He's got just a nose for the puck, nose for where to go and where to be. And you've seen that tenacity has him scoring in relative bunches, not a ton, but for this team, it's scoring in bunches early on here.
Well, and I saw him on the power play, which was kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting to see him there, but he is getting some PP time and looked pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's another guy that I think certainly is a guy to follow. I noticed that Juha Jaska finally broke through and scored his first goal in North America, and so that was kind of exciting for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was a nice. It was actually Robidas who fed him the puck right in the middle there from a position where you might have normally expected a shot. So I think he kind of caught the defense off guard, and then Jaska, who I believe had been snake bitten about as much as anyone on this team, finally was able to. And you could just see the relief on leaving his shoulders as he celebrated that first one. So, it's a process for these young guys too, but also, when you're in a scoring drought like that, I think there's kind of following everyone, just like this second, thought kind of process where you have the puck and it's like, you should be shooting right now, but I'm not scoring. So maybe I can try and find the other guy for like the nice play and maybe give him a better chance at the net. And I've seen this on the power play many times. Sometimes you just got to grip it and rip it. And that's what Jaska did. Put it upstairs, brought him within one. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough last night. But, again, you're starting to see more of these habits and less so the ones on Friday night against Grand Rapids. That was just, that's one you need the memory of a goldfish for. Just put it away and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, most of the games they've been in the game, it seems, certainly watching highlights and so on, it seems like they're very much in these games. Let's talk about the decor for a minute. Now, obviously Scott Morrow has had a little bit of offense, so he's been off to a bit of a good start, although he's sitting at -6 right now, so that's not the best stat. What are we seeing with Scott Morrow these days?
Just command with the puck. I think everyone knows kind of his game at this point, his, the way that he's able to dynamically attack with, his skating, with his IQ, and, it offers a new level for this team to attack now. Yeah, I think where the defense has been not even struggling, but I think when they're pressing so much on the attack in these instances where they fall in behind and they're looking for goals and they're desperate to tie it up or just get back in the game.
Yeah.
And going the other way, there's a breakaway or an odd man rush and they get 5 chances, 4, none of them go in. They get 1 chance against and it goes back in. And exactly. And it's one of the more frustrating parts of the game right now. And it's all about, knowing when the pinch, knowing, when you have to stay back, play a little more conservatively, cover your man. And, I get it if it's, 5 minutes left like it was in Manitoba. Yeah, you kind of gotta press. So,
yes,
I'm not going to knock these kids. They're all still learning. They're, you're those little intricate details of the in-game adjustments, and it's like I said, it's just as much as putting the puck in the net is a process. Keeping the puck out of your net's a process too. So these kids are all learning. I'd feel like, not that you'd like to see a little more from the vets on both sides of the puck, maybe kind of try and take the reins here a little bit, but I mean, Brendan Lemieux's got 2 points. You'd like to see maybe a little more on the defensive side from a guy like Joachim Ryan or Ronan Seeley. But again, it's all just kind of coming together as a unit, and these things take time. This team wasn't gonna be a juggernaut in November, and you don't want them to be a juggernaut in November. You want them to be a juggernaut in April and in May. So. As long as the trajectory just keeps moving up, then I think this team will be fine.
Well, and I think you've hit upon a very key point that, Wolves fans and, Caniacs who are following the Wolves need to keep in mind. These players have not played together for the most part. So you've got a couple of guys, sure, they were together last year in Chicago, but for the most part, these guys have been in different parts of the world, playing on different teams, different systems, and all of a sudden they're creating a new kind of camaraderie along with trying to understand how to play together and so on. So, and Cam Abbott's got to try different lines. I know he's moving combinations around. He's trying different people, trying to find the right, mix. And, that's something like the Canes had to go through similar things with a lot of new players in the lineup. So, again, we need patience. These guys have got the skill. I mean, if you watch and you've seen these closely as well, Andrew, these guys have got real skill. And they can play. Make no mistake about it. It's just going to take a little while for them to get their kind of synergy together, start to gel. And I think they're going to be a strong team, as you've mentioned. You look at, I was really pleased to see Domenick Fensore get his first goal. And of course, I've talked a lot about Dom and his former partner, I think I'm not sure they're still together, but Alexis Legault. Those two guys I really think are great. What's going on with them?
Yeah, they were still together as a pairing, okay. And they still offer. I love the dynamic between the two of them. Might be my favorite and over these first 11 games or so that we've had here. Fensore, again, you kind of you understand his game, what he can do offensively, and just the smooth skating. But Alexis Legault has really kind of made a name for himself early on here, especially with dropping the mitts and stepping up for his teammate that kind of got crunched against the boards last night. So he's establishing himself physically, but he's the way he skates and moves as a big body has been super impressive. And so being able to, make impacts on both sides of the ice has really kind of shown his value to this team. And with that, he's getting more minutes, more opportunities to be out on the ice and make those kinds of impacts. And I've really liked to see from this whole defensive pairing. Alexis Legault is probably been my, again, not really paying as much attention to these young guys coming in until they hit Chicago. And I'm like, whoa, right. Where did this come from? So, big fan of Legault's game, and I think that there's even more to come from him later on as we get into the season.
Well, there's a lot of folks getting on the Legault bandwagon, that's for sure. And of course, I had seen him with Quinnipiac quite a bit and was really impressed. And I've mentioned many times that I think the Canes pulled off a real steal getting him later in the draft. And he's a guy that also is very mature and is much closer to, I think, an NHL type job. He might be a year or two away, but he's certainly a guy that you can see that trajectory. Do you see the same thing with Legault?
I do. I think that, to me, it's always, it's the skating and keeping up with the pace before anything else, that's one thing I've noticed at the NHL. If you can't skate, if you can't move, it doesn't matter if you're the sweetest hands or the nicest shot. You're not going to play. Shout out to Teemu Pulkkinen, the god in Detroit who had the hardest cannon of a shot but could never skate up to the play. Yeah. Oh, geez. So if seeing Legault being able to actually move with a big body out there that he has is probably going to be his most important asset. And again, these are things that are going to take time, and with obviously a big backlog up there in Carolina on defense, yeah. it might be a little bit, especially considering the guy coming over from Russia and pretty soon here. But it doesn't. For these guys, it doesn't really matter. You have to show up to work every single day, and eventually your opportunity will come. So, and if he comes in with that mindset and keeps working at it in Chicago, it'll come, as you said, sooner rather than later. But just got to keep, putting in the work and doing what he does and playing his game.
Well, it's interesting that former Wolf and of course, now with the Hurricanes, Spencer Martin said something similar. He said, the big thing I learned is when I'm playing for a team, I'm playing for that team, and I need to play my best and not be concerned about should I be, trying to get up to the big club or whatever. So that's a good point, Andrew, and I think very, very appropriate. And again, I think with the defensive core on the Wolves, the one thing I've been impressed with, of course, is these young guys can all motor. I mean, you think about, you just talked about Legault. We know Fensore can. That's one of the big things for Dom. You've got Ronan Seeley who can fly. You've got, Alexis Himasalmi, and of course, Scott Morrow. These guys can all skate. And I think that's a pattern for the Hurricanes. Of course, the big club has folks who can really motor as well. So they definitely are picking these players with that in mind. And for sure, there's some good ones here. But yeah, they're going to have the work cut out for them to find a home with the Hurricanes. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about Ruslan Khazheyev. Now, Khazheyev, to me, I really loved him in the camp that the Canes had, the summer camp and so on, and into the prospect showcase. He's a guy he's a big guy. He's another one of the folks that's been trained in Russia, so he's got that certain style, and we've seen that with several of the top goalies in the league right now, and actually Pyotr Kochekhov's moving into that category as well. And again, he's a guy that I think is starting to find his way a little bit. I've noticed he's put together some pretty strong games. He's been relied upon a lot, of course. You've got both Peretz and Martin up in Carolina right now. So what are we seeing with Ruslan Khazheyev?
Yeah, I don't think we were expecting to see so much at Khazheyev this early in the season. But that's the way that things shake out in this league. At one moment you're starting for the Bloomington Bison, and the next you're running back to back on a Friday, Saturday, and it's no one. And I tell you what, no one's gonna feel bad for you either, because every team in the league at some point or another deals with this. So, Khazheyev looks like a 19-year-old getting his feet wet in this league, and I'd say he's doing probably about as much as you can ask out of him. The Grand Rapids game probably like to have a couple of those goals back. Last night against Manitoba, he was screened on one, another one where, the defense was just nowhere to be found for the guy out front and just tucked it right past him. But I mean, he's been making some really excellent saves and keeping his team in it when he's been called upon. And, it's being thrust into this kind of situation where, again, you're the number 3 guy on the roster. Now it's like, okay, you're the guy, dude. So it's a tall thing to ask out of a 19-year-old who, yes, I imagine probably doesn't speak the best English to communicate with his defense or anything like that. But he's doing an admirable job as is with, considering the lack of goal support and everything like that in front of him. So I keep saying it's a process for these guys, and it is. Of course, but I've liked what I've seen from him. I think maybe I know he kind of wanders a little bit from his position, kind of over cutting the angle down a little too hard on one. I know he got burned against Grand Rapids for that, and so to maybe kind of like it's all just kind of working on his angles and everything. But again, I've sung the praises of Stan Dubicki, the goaltending coach there in Chicago, yes, who Carolina has retained over, the past affiliations and everything. And he's been there for the Wolves for the last 10 years or so, as far as I can remember. So he'll dial it in for the young kid, language barrier and all. And he was there working with Kochekhov when he first came over from Russia.
Pyotr before he could speak English,
right? So this isn't Stan's first rodeo. So they'll get to work. They'll work on. They'll address the things that need to be addressed on. And I've certainly liked what I've seen from Khazheyev early on here.
Well, Khazheyev, he only comes out of what would have been junior type play in Russia. He wasn't even in the KHL. So he's a guy that's making the jump. Again, we talk about this so much, coming over from another country. He's got the language challenges. He's got a whole bunch of things that he's trying to deal with. But I think when you watch him, and this is what I've been impressed with, he is a big man. He commands that goal, and he looks like a guy that he can make some incredible saves at times. And I know we've seen that. He's still trying to get the consistency up, so some of the others that he should be making, he makes as well. But I think in general, you can see the skill and you can see that this guy can move. He's a very, adept goaltender and a guy that at 19 years old, you think about, gosh, 2 or 3 years of grooming in Chicago, what are you going to have? He's going to be a heck of a goaltender. And I think he's going to have a real shot. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on Khazheyev, and we'll probably talk about him regularly because he's one of my favorites on the Wolves. But anyway, we'll do that. So situation, not a great start. Trying to find their way. Some of the younger guys starting to get a little bit of mojo. What do you see in the next coming days with the Wolves?
Yeah, well, kind of as you're talking about how Carolina drafts these guys who can really skate and wheel and all that. That's why I'm not really hitting the panic button this early on, because I've seen this team move and play with pace. It's not like they're getting caved in every night on these losses, right? They're generating, they're possessing the puck in the offensive zone. They're just not scoring. And that's obviously kind of a big part of the game. But when you have all these habits that are leading up to the goals that look pretty good, could use some tweaks here and there, but it's the finishing where I think there needs to be a little bit of work. Maybe they need to go bring a shooter tutor out at practice or something like that. But there's I've liked the pace that they play with. I like a lot of the habits in game and in between the whistles and all that. It's just I feel like you just got to keep your nose to the grindstone, and eventually the floodgates will open with this team. It's not going to be a like, oh, hey, look, they just scored 6 goals, they're back. It's a night in and night out thing. It's consistency. It's the biggest thing that I've highlighted about young players at this level is, okay, you might have it on Friday, but if you don't have it on Saturday or Sunday, what does it matter? You have to bring it every single night. And, as long as they can keep those habits going night in and night out, and aside from Friday, it looks like it's been going pretty good. I'm not super worried about this team. Are they going to hit some bumps in the road? Can I forecast when this scoring drought is really going to come to an end? Not really, but I'm pretty confident that at some point the goals are going to start coming and this team's going to be piling up the points with a little more regularity here in the future.
Well, and one of the things we see with the Wolves, which we expect, it's the way the Canes play. They play a hard game. They work very, very hard. And they're gonna find their opportunities, and so much of it is confidence, particularly with these young guys. They're pushing. It seems like they're pushing rope up a hill. They're trying to find a way to get break through, and then all of a sudden it becomes easy. And we're seeing a little bit of that with Nadeau, and I think we'll see that with some of these other young players as well. So definitely, it'll come. We just have to be patient, and I think that's exactly the right approach right now as well. Andrew, is just kind of let's just watch it and follow these guys, and the ones that are starting to make their way. Let's keep an eye on those guys, but as well, let's follow these young players that are they're still trying to find it, right? The Unger Sorums, the Gleb Trikazas, and so on, and over time. And I think the fortunate thing too is with the Wolves, the Canes are not in a position that they're pushing to get these guys up. They're not. They can take their time. They can put them in another lineup, help them learn some things, and watch from the press box or whatever, and get their game together. They've got lots of time to do this. I mean, you think about a guy like Trikazov. He's got lots of time. He's like 19 years old, so no panic here. We can sit him out for some games. We can take our time with him, reduce his playing time, whatever the case is. And I think it's still fine. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be a player in the future at all for the Canes. Any other thoughts as we kind of wrap up today, Andrew?
I kind of mentioned last year's team compared to this year's team, and I've mentioned the processes. I don't know how much I can stress more to not hit the panic button. Just coming off my own personal experience with the Griffins last year, new coach, new system, a lot of new players, looked really bad for the first couple of months. And then in December, turned it around at the Christmas break and then shot up to number 2 in the division. Is this team going to do the same thing? It's a little early to tell. You got Milwaukee and Grand Rapids that are pretty anchored up at the top spot in the division there. And but when you look at the standings, there's Grand Rapids, Milwaukee, and Texas. Then there's a huge drop-off with a lot of teams that are in very similar positions to Chicago. So everything's very malleable here early on. A lot of other teams in your own division are still kind of looking for their own identities along with the Wolves. So it's a long season. You got another 60-so games of this where everyone's going to be battling each other for position, and you're still figuring out what you got in a lot of these guys. And it's going to, nothing's going to be figured out by today as they take on the Rockford Ice Hogs. So it's, it's going to take some time. And that's for everyone involved. But I think that the bones are there for a good team to, by the time that we really get into the dog days of the season, that they're really going to kind of show us who they are. And I still feel like there's a lot of fun and interest in this squad moving forward, and we haven't even really tapped into.
Well said. And as always, Andrew, it's great to talk Chicago Wolves hockey with you. For those of you who've been watching or listening, if you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you have any comments, please leave those down below. Andrew and I will try to get back to you just as quickly as possible. And if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, please subscribe and hit the bell, and you'll be made aware of those episodes. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up real soon right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes. You need Storm Tracker.